Welcome to HeartMind-ify. Before we start the show, just a reminder to share, rate, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it. And please give us a 5-star rating. It helps us beat the big tech algorithms.
I'm John Izzy. Change can be difficult for a lot of us, but when we understand what makes us tick, we develop a better understanding of who we are and begin a journey of discovering our best self. Join me for a free session at johnizzy.com.
And I'm Kim Cordy, creator of the Emotion Chef Framework, an emotion management tool. Thoughts drive emotions, and emotions drive thoughts, but it's our emotions that drive our decisions and behaviors. Find out more at kimcordy.com.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Knowing each other personally and socially for the past 10 years, Kim and John have joined forces, bringing years of experience and training, providing a platform for growth and personal development, along with a little humor. John is the heart, Kim is the mind, and together they are HeartMind-ify. Hello, Kim. I hope you're doing well today.
I am fantastic, and how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. You know, though, it's been a long and busy week, but that's a good thing. You know, I like being busy, so I usually welcome it. Sometimes it drives me crazy, though. But as long as I have time at some point to reflect on my day and meditate, then everything is good. When I don't have time for those two activities, I find myself exhausted and just unable to focus, and I start to worry about little things. Which brings us to today's topic, turning worriers into warriors. Wow, I said that right this time.
Yeah.
But before we jump into today's podcast, last week's episode on the body budget was really fun to record. It's a great topic, don't you think?
Well, it's one of my favorite things to talk about.
Exactly.
I think that it's a little complicated at first, but once you get the idea of it, it's pretty easy. You know, I'm emergency budget or regular budget, and that's when it gets fun.
Yeah, it's really a good topic, and you're right, it can be difficult, but once you work with it and understand it, it makes a lot of sense. And there was just a lot of good information in that podcast on many different levels. So if you haven't listened to it yet, go over to our podcast page and listen to episode 10. Is your body budget breaking the bank? Now, for today's topic in turning warriors into warriors, Kim, you mentioned last week a song that I believe it was John McEnroe's wife, Patti Smith, that sang... Smythe. Okay, that sang a song
she calls
entitled
it Patti Smythe.
Patti Smythe. She sings a song called The Worrier. So without further ado, everybody, here is the chorus from the song.
Great song. I love her.
I know, right?
She has
She
an
is
amazing
pretty awesome.
voice.
Well, it's the 80s, right? And all the songs in the 80s were just absolutely fun. I mean, I just saw myself just going like this, you know? It's kind of crazy.
I was bopping.
I love it. Now, we aren't going to go and conquer any heartache today, but what we are going to address is the different types of worry and the effects that it has on the body, and ways to become a champion over your worries, like the song said, or become a warrior instead of a worrier. Sound like a plan?
I think that does sound like a plan, John. Let's get to it.
All right. So before we talk about worrying, we need to make sure that we don't confuse it with anxiety. Worrying tends to be in the heads more than a physical sensation, which is in the body, like anxiety. Worry tends to be specific, while anxiety is more diffuse. meaning we worry about getting to the airport on time, but we're anxious about traveling. A vague and more general concern. Worry is verbally focused, while anxiety includes verbal thoughts and mental imagery. Worry can, and in chronic cases, can cause emotional distress. Worry is caused by more realistic concerns than anxiety. If you are concerned about failing a test because you didn't study, you are worried. But if you are concerned that your professor didn't ask you about your birthday party, then you're anxious. To me, the big difference between worry and anxiety is that worrying is often temporary, but anxiety can linger.
Anxiety is a feeling, since you related it to sensations in the body. So that's kind
Uh-huh.
of like an overall body feeling. And
Mm-hmm.
I know that that's how I experience anxiety. But it sounds like what you're saying here is that worry is more than just the sensation. It's the focused thoughts in our head. It's what we talk about. So who do we talk to more than ourselves? So it's what we're saying to ourselves, and it can be what we're saying to others. Am I about right there?
Yeah, no, I think you're right on there.
Okay. So I was just going to ask you, are there different kinds of worry, or is it just more general in nature?
You're right. There are different kinds of worry. Worry, a lot of professionals will say that worry is defined in two different ways. Working out differences between useful, and the key word here is solvable worry or problems, and then problems that are floating. And basically, what that means is that there is worry that is solvable because it has an underlying problem that responds to problem solving. Whereas floating worry needs to be tackled in another way because there is no problem to solve. So let me break it down even further. Solvable worry is typically about problems that are currently happening and have a solution. You might ask your friends, your coworkers, family members, or advice. But when it's a floating worry, you refrain from asking people for advice because we fear that they will think that there is nothing to worry about. But I want to break it down even further into layman's terms. I like to think of it in three different steps. And you might say low, medium, and high. I call it normal, everyday worry. The worries about job, money, family, kids, typical worries, everyday worries that everybody goes through. Situational worry, which is a little bit more heightened, but it's family illness, maybe a loss of a job, a robbery. These are problems that are solvable, but they carry with them a bigger weight. They're heavier. And the third is a chronic worrier. And this can lead to anxiety if it's not checked. So this is where you become focused to the point where you are persistent, excessive, and worry becomes intrusive. Any thoughts?
You know, I guess I'm always the person who keeps butting in and saying, "Oh, just can you provide me more detail?" I just want to make sure that I understand what you're talking about when you say everyday versus chronic. Because if you worry every day over your job, your money, your family, is it to the degree in which you worry every day? Because I'm just trying to uh, make sure myself and everyone's clear as to everyday versus chronic.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on it. So let me do it with the words low, medium, and high. So medium or situational is more of a heightened worry that is caused by an event that calls for a higher sense of concern. That would be that, you get a call at work and your father has had a heart attack and he's being rushed to the hospital. So all of a sudden you're worried, and it's heightened because it's not just your child stubbed his toe and you're worried about him crying all night, right? So it carries a little bit more weight. But to your point about chronic worrying, if it becomes your main focus to the point where you can't think about anything else and it prevents you from doing anything else, then yes, that would be more chronic or acute. And that can easily lead to anxiety.
Okay, that really
Does that
helped
does
a
that help?
lot. Yes, because if you worry about your job, or if you worry about money or your family, it's normal to be concerned when your kids walk out the door and they may be going somewhere that you're not very comfortable with. So you worry about them, but it's much more different than if you worry all day, every day about your kids, and you might not even have a good reason to worry, right?
Yeah, and I think it's, I like to look at it as like, is the worrying disrupting my life, right? Am I worrying to the point where I'm every waking hour I'm thinking about it? Every time I have a break during the day, it's the first thought of my mind. In fact, I can't even focus on the job I have to do because I'm constantly or consistently worrying about something. That's more chronic, which can lead to having an issue with anxiety.
Perfect. Thanks for that.
You're welcome. So it's important to note again that worry is a result of a problem, right? An incident. And though the type of worry can be heavier than others, worry still can cause a stress response. So let's talk about that for a second. Stress comes from the demands and pressures we experience each day. Long lines at the grocery store, rush hour traffic, a phone ringing nonstop, or a chronic illness are all examples of things that can cause stress on a daily basis. When worries become excessive, chances are you'll trigger the stress response. The stress response is simply put this way: it's the perception of the challenge and the automatic physiological reaction called fight or flight. This brings a surge of adrenaline and sets your body on high alert. For instance, this happened to me many years ago. I was working for a doctor, and I used to make the cash deposit at night after hours. Now, living in the city, I knew that taking a different route to the bank was something you just did. So, and you did it because you didn't want anybody to recognize your pattern. But this particular time, while walking to the bank, someone behind me put an object into my back and said, "Keep walking and hand me the money." The perception of the challenge for me was he's going to jump me. My fight and flight response was not today, and I took care of the situation. But when it was over, I was so anxious and worried that this was going to happen again. So for the next couple of days, I was looking over my shoulder on the way to the bank. But because I took care of the situation the way that I did and recognized the risk involved in walking to the bank and working through those issues, I was able to take control of it and not let it control me by working through the worry in order to solve the problem.
Last week, we talked about the emergency budget, which is what the stress response invokes.
Yes.
And we have this emergency budget for a reason. And you were on alert after this robbery for a good reason, right? You were protecting yourself or trying not to get yourself in that situation again. So this is when worry can be a good thing, right? Like worry, just because you worry about something doesn't always mean it's bad. Being on alert, worrying that it could happen, was making you very alert to your situation, and until you were comfortable that it wasn't going to happen again. But somewhere in the back of your head, you were always on alert for this.
I think you're 100% on. Worry can at times be a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's how you deal with it in solving the problem, or not deal with it and never solve the problem, and then allow it to turn into a form of anxiety. But, Kim, there's also a physical aspect to worry. Worry and emotional stress can trigger a host of health problems. The problems occur when fight or flight is triggered daily by excessive worrying or anxiety. The fight or flight response causes the body's sympathetic nervous system to release stress hormones such as cortisol. These hormones can boost blood sugar levels and triglycerides, blood fats, that can be used by the body for fuel. The hormones also cause physical reactions such as difficulty swallowing, dizziness, dry mouth, fast heartbeat, fatigue, irritability, muscle tension, nervous energy, shortness of breath, sweating, trembling, twitching. When the excessive fuel in the blood isn't used for physical activities, the chronic worrier can suffer from anxiety. This flood of stress hormones can have serious physical consequences, including suppression of the immune system, digestive disorder, and more serious cases can cause premature coronary artery disease or even a heart attack. And if this goes untreated, chronic worry and anxiety can lead to depression and, unfortunately, even suicidal thoughts. So it's extremely important to recognize the symptoms as a result of worry and anxiety. For serious disorders, this might require cognitive behavioral therapy or even medication. You know, Kim, I know you have something to say about this, especially when it relates to stress and anxiety. So why don't you go ahead and give us your thoughts?
Well, of course, John, I always have something to say about this kind of stuff. Pretty almost about anything if you were to ask Andrew. But the point is that I agree with you so much. The body was meant to experience stress or anxiety, however, for a limited time. And it's the inability to get out of that mode is why we get sick. You were talking about digestive system orders, the immune system. It can even create issues like dementia, set you up for dementia or memory related conditions because it impacts your brain. You have so much cortisol build up that the brain function is inhibited. Our blood, instead of going to our stomach to digest its food, it's going to the muscles. Why? Because the body thinks it needs to run. If the body thinks it needs to take flight, right? That's what happened when you saw a saber-toothed tiger back in the old days. So if you have these thoughts or these issues that or emotional issues, I should say, that's creating these worries, and these impact our thoughts, which can create more anxiety and more worry. So it becomes a vicious cycle. And it's the ability to get out of that cycle and let your body come back to the rest and digest state that you're able to help yourself get out of it. So it's hard to get out of the vicious cycle when you're in it. And that's why it's really important to take steps to help your body relieve it of that vicious cycle.
I so agree with you on that. And speaking of vicious cycles, so there are ways to take your power back, right? Because that's the whole point. Instead of allowing the situation to take control of you, you have to take control of the situation. So you have to take
like
your
a
power
warrior.
Back. There you go, like a warrior.
Like a warrior.
Well, you guys have heard in other podcasts, Kim and I talk a lot about things you can do to help make yourself a better person, right? Internally. And one of the things that we do in taking our power back is becoming a warrior, right? Because a good champion needs the appropriate tools to succeed. So I'm going to give you some tools to put in your toolbox. Relying on these can have a lasting positive effect in the way you deal with worry and even anxiety. So let's go through a list of them. And believe me, there are other tools, and we're going to get to that in a moment. But one of the easiest tools is eating healthily, right? That's a quick one. Exercise doesn't have to be long, just a little bit to get your heart rate up. Activities that help you relax, like meditation and yoga. Here's a good one. Choose a set time and place for worrying. It should be the same day, the same time every day, and early enough so that it won't make you anxious right before bed. During this time, you're allowed to worry about whatever's on your mind. The rest of the day, however, is a worry-free zone. Another trick that Kim and I have talked about is write down your worries and then continue about your day. Remind yourself that you'll have time to think about it later. There is no need to worry about it right now. The key here is to physically write them down. It's much harder to do than just thinking about it, but more impactful in the long run. Right, Kim?
Yes, there is a relationship between your brain and the neural pathways. And when you write, it will stimulate more areas of your brain. So what happens is that as you write, you are uncovering some of the things that might be behind your worry. And it's so, so helpful.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. One of the big things to do is to challenge anxious thoughts. Avoid all or nothing thinking, overgeneralization, focusing on the negatives while filtering out the positives, coming up with reasons why positive events don't account, expecting the worst case scenario to happen. And here's a big one. Believing the way you feel reflects reality, meaning I feel like such a fool, everyone must be laughing at me. Avoid that kind of thought, because that's just going to continue the cycle of worry, because now you're going to have something else to worry about.
Yeah. In my course, we call those ants, automatic negative thoughts. And it's part of our human nature. Remember, we talked about earlier that our brain wants to protect us. So we tend to go to these negative thoughts as a protective measure. That's why you look at negative reviews. You look at more companies pay attention to the negative reviews, because that's just how we are built. And our negative thoughts are coming from our subconscious, which we've developed throughout our life. And it may have benefited us at one point in life and not today. So that's why it's so important to challenge, as you just said, these types of thoughts. You said it, and Dr. Amen, who was the person who taught me about ants, he says you can't believe every silly thought you have. And he got this from Byron Katie, who's another author, but it's a series of questions when you ask, is it true? And if you might say, oh, yes, it's true. Then when you challenge it, is it really true? You might not be able to say, is it true 100% of the time? Because you just said it yourself. It's all or nothing thinking, overgeneralization, right? So when you're doing that, you're like saying, oh, yeah, it's always true. You always leave me out. You never kiss me goodbye. And it's like, you know that that's not really true. So then what does it feel like when you have this thought? Like, just connect in your body how it feels when you have that thought. And what would it feel like if you didn't? If it's not a true thought and it makes you feel bad, then change it around. Go up into the sky and try and look at it from different points of view, pretending like you're looking at this thought from different angles. And that's where you can find the different view of it, because you're focused on one view and there's different sides to it. And being able to step away from it and challenge yourself, like you mentioned, gives you that capability of looking at it from different positions.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. One of the tricks I use, or have used them before, is by talking to somebody else and communicating those worries to a friend or a family member. And not only that, but asking them to play me in the conversation and allow me to counsel them with my own worries. Because what it does,
they have to talk in a deep voice.
Yeah, they have to talk in a deep voice. But what it does is you're giving advice to somebody else, except that advice you're giving to is to yourself. So it's taking away the personal attachment to it, and it's allowing you to look at it from a different angle, or like you said, from above. One of the other things is to distinguish between solvable and unsolvable or floating worries. For chronic cases of worry and or anxiety, talking to a professional, a coach, or a therapist, if needed, will help redirect and deal with the unknown by making it tangible and manageable. And this is my absolutely favorite. I use this in my coaching all the time. If you tend to fall into worry, put a gum band, well, if you're in Pennsylvania, you'll call them gum bands, but put a rubber band around your wrist. You didn't know that?
I was just going to say, no, I was going to go, John, I don't chew gum and put it around my wrist.
Hey, we call it a gum band.
Gum band.
My sister's going to laugh when she
Not
hears
here
this.
in California.
All right. So put a rubber band around your wrist And every time you find yourself going into the worry mode, pop the rubber band. This tells your brain that you are taking control back and becoming a worrier instead of a worrier. For example, when I was robbed or when I was threatened to be robbed, that had a huge impact on me. It's a very stressful moment, and my reaction during the incident and after the incident was key to overcoming the fear or worry that it would happen again. Will it happen again? Maybe, but am I worried about it? No. And why is that? Because I gave myself time to process the risks involved and figured out ways to mitigate those risks by writing down my options. Instead, treating the incident as a problem, unable to be resolved, I treated the incident as a learning moment to break down the events and find solutions. So what did I do? I was already taking different routes, right? You know that if you live in the city. And that was a huge plus. I was walking on the outside of the curb, which is easy for someone to run up alongside of you on the road. And I had the bag of money in my hand against my body. Stupid, right? But it was making it visible to others. So in order to fix that, what I did is I did the same thing by taking different routes. I walked in the middle of the sidewalk and I bought a backpack to put the money in so that it wasn't visible. Now I looked like everybody else and was less susceptible to being robbed. Basically, I wasn't standing out. Instead of worrying, I became a champion and turned into a warrior. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask our listeners, you, to give us examples of how you have become a warrior instead of a worrier. We read the comments all the time about people telling us that they'd like the show or that the topic was interesting. But today we want you to leave a comment to engage the rest of the community of listeners and kind of engage with us. And, we'll comment back and you can comment back and we'll find ways to become less worriers and becoming better warriors. That sounds pretty cool, right, Kim?
I like that. I like that a lot because it's your first step in writing things. Granted, you're going to be typing in a computer, which is not as ideal as using your hand, but it's a great start, John.
Yeah, I think it is. All right, Kim. So what's on the agenda for next week?
First, I want to say thank you, John, for leading such an interesting and needed subject for our podcast. I enjoyed it very much. We touched on negative thoughts today. And for our next show, we're going to go where negative thoughts lead us. We already talked about one, which is worry and anxiety. Next topic is going to be complaining.
Oh,
Why
Lord.
do people complain so much? Is it because they have more outlets for it on social media platforms? Have people always complained like this? Well, we are going to talk about that next week on HeartMind-ify. So please, please join us.
So Kim, thank you so much. This was a great day. This was a great show. And our listeners, have a great week. And we'll catch up with you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.
Stay safe. Stay healthy.
New shows are available every Saturday right here on HeartMind-ify.podbean.com or wherever you listen. Kim and I would like to thank each and every one of you for allowing us to be a small part of your life. Be kind to yourself and remember, our hearts tell the story, but our mind is the conductor.